So today, this is fun. It's been 3 months after all, and I see that I didn't follow all the procedures precisely the way that, and my screen energy saver switched on. I clicked to get it back and inadvertently stopping the video. So here we go. Continuation, part 2 of Thousands of You. So we're talking about being vested in our own personal vision of you, and I was talking about the dream state and how it wasn't really tough for me to recognize that the ultimate illusory nature of everything. As I said, the illusory nature of nature. All that is not what we see or deem or accept or experience as reality. Reality is its own. Reality is simply reality. It's inclusive. It's everything and all things in all time in all dimensions. And no matter how we categorize that's all attempts of our mind grappling with the immensity of what is. And probably most problematic, it's fairly straightforward to envision the immensity of what is. But what is not, and as we look at immensity, as things get bigger, we tend to assign them properties of being more complicated. But the biggest complication of all is recognizing the simplicity of the immensity, the simplicity of all that there is. It cannot be any other way. It's everything. Simple. But getting to that state, but being able to recognize that one might not have the firmest grip on reality, that my reality is no less or no more valid than anyone else's reality, because in the end, they're all nonsense, nonsensical, because it flies in the face of what is. But we're talking about dream state and why I didn't really have such a firm grip on reality. I have an active imagination, a brain that never stops. Until 6 years ago, unending questioning, until I recognized that I was all out of questions. And the reason I was out of questions is there's no answers to my questions. It's just an exercise. I looked at it as my calisthenics of the brain, but no longer. From a man so full of questions to a man of absolutely no questions. I question nothing. And this brings a smile and contentment and peace. And it was a matter of surrendering, as always. The one thing that we can do, the one thing within our purview, is our surrender. And this is a continuous. It's a gerund, surrendering. This process is never complete as long as we're breathing in and out. So we talked about the waking dream state, daydreaming. Economy trip is, one of my students called it economy trip, means that daydreams, you can go anywhere. It didn't cost anything. No carbon footprint. How's that? Travel in your mind. And you can go interdimensional. It's unlimited. But then there's the dreams of sleep. And again, I've mentioned, I look for what's embedded in the dream. I try to remember in the morning and make an effort to remember my dreams. Because it seems like just before my eyes pop, I'm in the pinnacle of my dream state. And I have no idea, or do I care, how long this dream state lasts or lasted. Because time, as our measurement, is simply that, just our attempt to measure. So it's essentially, in the long term, biological time, for sure, meaningless. What's an hour, a minute, a day, a week, a month, a year? In the purview, within the confines, within time itself. Time, space, continuum, matter and energy, the marriage of matter and energy. But as I said more than once, I follow my dreams. If I dream something in the sleeping state and that I remember and there's some significance, that has more validity, credibility with me than any of my so-called conscious waking thoughts. Because conscious waking thoughts, most of us are not very receptive to what's the energy pouring into us, continue. That field of neutrinos that's bombarding us with information from the stars and beyond. Continual. That's why neutrinos have a weight, albeit infinitesimal, but it's the information, it's the knowledge, it's the wisdom that we're bombarded with in the neutrino stream. 70% from our sun, 30% from beyond. But tens of thousands, of hundreds of thousands to millions of these charged neutrinos are bombarding us, passing right through everything that we construct, including this shell, passing right through, leaving imprint of information. And this is what I think that we're more open to, at least I'm more open to in the sleeping state. Perhaps I'm paying more attention. That may be the key. But anyway, this is a valuable resource. Whereas the thousands of you is only valuable in that it's useful in the process of invalidating, dismissing, ignoring your self-constructed view of you. When it's the only one, and that's the one within us that we tend to look at the world through until we get to the point where it's no longer useful or necessary. And this comes with the understanding that it's just a construct. It's just our ego, so bent on survival that it attempts to overpower everything about, essentially, what makes us unique human beings. So we tend to think that the ego is our definition of our uniqueness. And I see our ego as the antithesis of who we are. It's an adversary. It keeps us separate. It keeps us divided, even in the face of overwhelming togetherness, oneness. But I'm hoping when I'm talking about thousands of you, I'm hoping those in the process of battling, indeed it's a battle, it's a war, battling their ego, the supremacy of their ego, to consider that there's so many yous, each person that crossed your path that either, as I said, consciously or unconsciously, formulated any opinion about you or what or who or why or when or how you are. And they relate to that you, just as you relate to the you of the ego, the you of your creation. They react to you from the you of their creation. So if you can see so many, if there's thousands, what makes this one so special? Other than its loud insistence that it is special, that it envelops, it is your individual uniqueness. But just as my beads, one amongst the many, each bead has its unique existence, its unique expression, but it does not separate it from everything else. So you learn that you can be an individual. You are an individual. But within the chain of connectedness. So you leave the Maya, the illusion, behind. And this is just simply, I'm suggesting this might be a tool. It certainly was useful to me. Although, as I said, was never particularly vested in the infallibility, shall we say, of my personal attempts to categorize, to find, to discover my you. So again, going back to this, who is I, me, my? This concretized my process, even though my process, as far as I can remember, goes back to from my earliest memories. This striving, this effort, this knowing that there was something bigger and better out there, in here, and learning to go in here to come out there. How could it be more connected, right? The circle of life, looking inward to experience outward. the circle of life. So probably it begins with surrendering. It begins with being able to say, to recognize what you don't know. Just as the Zen monk talked about I, me, my, and he said the only response that he would accept, the only response that would keep him in the Zen tradition of physically hitting you with a stick, which was the masters used to do if you were not sitting correctly, if you even gave the wrong answer, they would hit you with a stick, and then it became symbolic. As corporal punishment was kind of frowned upon as civilization advanced. But he would, any answer that you would pose to him, he would say, hit you with a stick. And he ended up with the cutest smile and a shrug. It's just shrugged with every atom in his body. And he said, don't know. And that was so liberating for me. That was a little epiphany, the awakening of some degree. Don't know. Notice the absent of the pronoun. It's not I don't know. It's simply don't know. It's not within our realm of calculability. We can't count that high. And we're never intended to qualify to be able to count that high. It would be an ultimate act of the ego if you thought that you could embrace and somehow contain all, when indeed you're simply, although minuscule part, you're simply a part of the all. And would be the ultimate act of audacity to think that you could embrace the all. The immensity, just too immense. So this process of surrendering, reviewing, considering, contemplating, meditating on everything. And probably a good place to start, because this is all you think you have. Start with this you. And it's useful to a point. It's useful for so many steps on the journey. But there become a time, like everything else, it needs simply to be discarded. Another image that's always stuck to me, and this was kind of an image that came to me, was gifted to me. And this is about us climbing this steep hill. And each of us is not only stooped in the effort, an exhaustive effort, to climb the hill that is life, climb the hill that is the awakening process. But we're doing this and we're carrying this 100-pound bag of shit on our shoulders, in the back, like this. We're carrying this. We're even stooped more. And I tell you, when you look at my posture, you would think that I took this quite literally, because I do have a slouch, and I try to sit up straight, straighten that spine. 70 years of slouching has made it tough, despite all the warnings from Mother. Stand up straight, son. Oh, and as soon as I relax, I'm back to this. But it's part of this image of carrying this bag of shit. And we hold on, we cling to that. We cling to that because in that bag is our shit, is our yous, who we think we are, our ego, our misunderstandings, our sorrows. And there's also good memories weigh on one just as much as bad memories. It's all about interpretation, how you choose to see them. But ultimately, there is no good or bad. There's degrees, a sphere. Good morphs into bad, and bad morphs into good. Yin and yang, the male and the female, the masculine and the feminine, captures this best. So this bag of shit, not only are we struggling up the hill, and we don't want to, someone said, can I help you with that bag? I was given Buddhas, two that prominently I remember that have been with me forever. And of course through time, and I've nuanced, I've fleshed in, I've had more concrete ideas of who these blessed beings were and are and will be. But that voice, their voices, spoken simultaneously, so that blended, I was used to hearing one voice and didn't really learn to separate into two until I became more sophisticated at listening. But asking to share the burden. Not expecting me to put it down, but asking that if they could carry. And I would cling to it because this was you, this was me, this was my vision of me, this was my you. So part of the act of surrendering is putting the bag. And I think it was not that simple for me to just simply drop the bag. I think I took things out and discarded them along the way and worked on not adding more to my bag. Karma. Acting consciously not to add more as I got rid of some until you're just left with an empty bag, and that just kind of dissipates, just kind of blows away. And somehow simultaneously, interestingly, that steep climb became a plateau. A plateau that would serve its purpose, a plateau, a rest stop. Place to rest, to regenerate, to consider. And then it would gently incline as my climb up the mountain continued. And I wish I could say that it was a gentle climb all the way, but that would be less than honest. There would be very steep cliffs. There'd be very steep mountains that would lead to another plateau that would perhaps suggest a gentle incline. Sometimes there were some declines, and that progress had to be recaptured through a steeper path, usually in the future. So living with this idea of your you is the only you. flies in the face of all the other yous created by everyone that around you, everyone near and dear, and not so near, and not so dear, have constructed. Why would your, other than familiarity and time and a vested interest, why would your version of you be any more legitimate? You hear people say they don't know me, they don't understand me. Yes, indeed, they understand you within the confines, within the limitations of who and what they are. That's no less profound of an understanding than your understanding, your intimacy of understanding that comes with opportunity. Opportunity that you're, who is more engaging than your you? Who is more consuming than your you? But when you start to understand, just by the nature of seeing all the other yous, that you begin the process of loosening up. You're sometimes way too firm, excuse me, firm grip on your concept of who you are. But this is just a tool, just something to meditate on, ruminate. As I've said before, like the cow puts the grass and becomes a cud. It's a ball of grass in their mouth, and they just chew on it. And it's part of the digestive process. It's preparing it to go to their 8 stomachs. But they have to break down the grass, the cellulite. They have to break it down. And it means chewing. But this has become a really good metaphor, a useful metaphor for me of my own process. How put something in my jaw, in my mouth, in my brain, and just chew it to make it more digestible, to allow the process, the physical chemistry of our body and mind, because that's all it is after all, is physical chemistry, to allow that to begin the process of digestion. And it's through this digestion, of course, that we get sustenance. It's what sustains us. It's what gives life to us. So you can make efforts to consciously choose what's in your cud. What are you chewing on? Are you chewing on regrets, sorrows? You choose. We do have so few choices in life, but this is amongst them, maybe even paramount. You get to choose what you invest in as reality, as the real. You can remain in a delusory state, and nobody, no medication, no psychiatrist, no guru can snap you out of this delusory. It takes immense self-effort. It takes time. It takes countless lives, in the tens of thousands, I would suspect, to get to the point where you reject your delusions. Where you learn to embrace what the Zen monk, Korean Zen monk said to us, don't know. And hear that echo, don't know. It's the deepest not knowing possible in our existence as we know it. Don't know. It's you're letting that bag of shit that I talked about in my other metaphor. You're letting that bag of shit, at least some of it, spill out. You're beginning the process of not adding more. And you're working to the state where you'll totally discard. Maybe you're fortunate you can just put the bag down. It's simple. For me, my experience has never been one of simplicity. It's ended up in the simplistic. It's ended up by embracing the simple. But the really convoluted, difficult process of arriving to the state where simplicity became obvious, overwhelming, and ultimately all that there is. So along the way I used that KISS, K-I-S-S, keep it simple, stupid. And of course it was always directed to moi, to me. Keep it simple, stupid, because I just knew that within complexity was simplicity itself. And I chose to let complexity ultimately lead me to simplicity. But a different yogic path, one of devotion, one of selfless service. It chose me, jhana yoga, the process of the mental battle. But there's others that just sing and chant and worship and love. And simplicity is first grasped by the simple, by the pure. The less simple, the less pure you are, the more work that you have to do, the more that surrender becomes your only tool. That's all that you have. This action, it's not a reaction, it's a conscious effort, it's an action. It's all that you really have, at least that I could find in my arsenal, that was readily available and useful.